Dave Dotson, author of the new book, The Manager's Handbook, and also lecturer at Stanford School of Business. Alfredo Ortiz is with us. He's the president and CEO of the Jobs Creators Network. And Alfredo, let me start with you. Obviously, there's a disconnect. By the way, I'll add on the private sector side, 149,000, significantly below what I think Wall Street was expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charles, look, we're actually not too surprised with the numbers because our national small business poll, which was really a forward-looking poll, because remember, all these numbers are really backward-looking. Our small business owners have not felt comfortable with where the economy was going for a few months now, especially concerned with inflation. 2/3 of our small business owners aren't feeling great about the economy. In fact, they think it's poor or fair at best. And they're not looking at hiring. They actually have their hiring plans on hold. And they're not also looking to raise wages. So this issue of basically 90% of the Biden's term where real wages didn't keep up with inflation, this is going to continue probably, going forward. And that's a real concern when you have, cost of groceries up 20%.
Yeah. Year over year, I know real wages have been down like 26 months in a row. Dave, how do you see the numbers and where do you think we go from here?
Well, actually, I don't think they're so bad.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dave.
Sure. Charles, I don't think they're so bad. I mean, if a year ago I was on the show and I said GDP was going to be growing at 2%, unemployment was going to be about 3.5%, and inflation was coming down to 4%, we'd be calling that a win. And so we as a nation have to decide, do we want to have the economy growing fast or do we want to be slowing it down? And the Fed has been saying we're going to try to slow it down. Well, this is exactly what happens when you crank up interest rates for as long as we have. So we shouldn't be particularly surprised by this.
Well, on that note, though, a year ago, or 2 years ago, I certainly would have been. Here's the wild card: $2 trillion in stimulus. That was really, for the most part, after the COVID emergency. That's what gave us this inflation scare, right? We hadn't even thought about inflation in this country for 40 years, an entire generation, and that's been the wild card, Dave. And I look at these numbers, for instance. I'm concerned about what happens over the next few months, over the next year. Black unemployment is now at 6%. 2 months ago, it was 4.7%. We can't have these numbers going up that fast. I mean, will that slow down?
That was actually, Charles, the most alarming number that I saw was what happened with black unemployment. And I've spent the day trying to figure out what is actually driving that and whether, it's a blip in the numbers and it's just a flash of what happened in the last 30 days, or there is some fundamental trend. The only thing I could think about is if when you break down the jobs report, you saw that where the real jobs were added was government, education, and healthcare. And what you might find is that the sectors that tended to employ black workers are the sectors that were deeply hurt, as opposed to the sectors that maybe the proportion of black workers was smaller. That's the best I could do, Charles, but I thought that was a really interesting number.
Yeah, and Alfredo, again, just trying to handicap, you talked earlier about how you look forward. Your work is forward-looking. Almost everything we react to in this country is in the rearview mirror. I'm looking at the so-called excess savings, which I think is an oxymoron, at least in most American households. Still, we were sitting on a lot, right? They said over $2 trillion. You can debate where we are now, but we're spending it fast. I mean, that's what we do, right? We're Americans. You give us money, we'll go out and shop. What happens when all of that goes away?
Well, Charles, that's exactly it. You have the president going around crowing about how good the consumer spending is and how healthy and resilient the consumer is, because look at all that spending. They're doing great. Well, first of all, they're spending a lot more, but they're actually getting a lot less because of inflation. Again, remember, inflation over his term is up collectively about 16%. And so this is an artificial kind of high overall, if you think about it, because they're doing it all on credit. Consumers are spending. Yes, they are, but it's on credit. The credit is at record high, credit card use, and savings is at record lows. And so this is actually an artificial high, and Biden has nothing to really crow about.
Yeah, consumers have brought the savings rate up from 2%. It's in the mid 4%. Obviously, Dave, that's far too little. Also, we saw mortgage rates rocket 5% in this last mortgage applications number. It just feels like really, really tough. Where do you see us going from here? And you mentioned the Fed, Dave. Are you worried that Jay Powell is going to go too far? That happens to be a major concern of mine.
Mine too, Charles. And you and I have shared the same concern over the last 6 months. If you look at where the jobs were added, which I just mentioned were education, government, and healthcare, in what world does a interest rate of 1/8 of a point or 1/4 point higher change that hiring rate? What we need to look at are the sectors that are sensitive to interest rates, and those sectors actually did not add very many jobs. So I am praying that the Fed sits on their hands, stops playing the economy like it's a video game, and lets things sort of settle down. Because right now, I'm not saying that the economy is fantastic, but it ain't broken when you've got inflation coming down to about 4% and you've got GDP growth about 2%. So let's not break it, Charles.
Yeah, well, I'm concerned that that's going to happen, and who knows, with the lag effect that might already be in play. So, Alfredo, where do we go from here? You've got more money coming in, still through either from the fiscal side. States are sitting on a bunch of cash. Listen, some of these programs, you can talk about manufacturing coming back, particularly with semiconductor chips. Right. But again, you got these two forces where the Federal Reserve is trying to tamp down on the economy. Obviously, the White House wants to pump it up as much as possible going into the election. How does that work out?
Well, it's not going to work out well because the Federal Reserve, I think, is going to probably take the rest of the year. They'll probably take at least another 50 basis points up there. So we're going to have a problem, related to that. But the problem, Charles, really is when we do that is you're really going to be stressing the community and regional banks where almost 60+% of small businesses access credit. Right. They've already having a hard time. They're very concerned about accessing credit. This is only going to make things worse. And remember, when 2/3 of new job growth is in the hands of these small business owners, they're not going to hire. They're not going to want to hire. They're not going to want to invest in their businesses. So I'm really concerned that going forward, we're probably going to look at least at a soft recession in first quarter of next year.
Yeah. Gentlemen, let's leave it there. Thank you both very, very much. Really appreciate it.